All right, let's talk about a number that quietly runs your financial life, the official inflation rate. But what if that number, the one we hear about on the news, isn't really telling the whole story?
Have you ever had that feeling? You look at your grocery bill, your rent, your healthcare costs, and they're all going up. But then you see the official inflation number and you just think, no way, that can't be right. Well, you're not going crazy. And that feeling, that disconnect, is exactly what we're digging into today. So yeah, today we're diving deep into a really powerful critique of the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. This is the main tool we use to measure inflation. And we're going to break down an analysis from the financial publication Wolf Street that says the whole calculation is, well, it's pretty broken, especially when it comes to the things that cost us the most.
So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll tackle what the source calls a housing data glitch. Then, we'll get into this absurd health metric. After that, we'll connect the dots and see why all this really matters, and stick around, because we'll finish with a plan to actually fix it.
First up, the big one, housing. For most of us, our rent or mortgage is our single biggest bill every month, right? So it makes sense that it's the biggest piece of the CPI puzzle. But according to this critique, that's exactly where the trouble starts. Just take a look at this. That massive chunk of the pie, more than a quarter of the entire CPI, is from one single thing called owner's equivalent of rent, or OER for short. Now think about that. If that one number is off, the whole picture of inflation is skewed. So what exactly is this OER thing?
Okay, and this is where it gets kind of weird. OER is not what homeowners are actually paying. It's not their mortgage payment, it's not their property taxes, none of that. It's a survey. The government literally asks homeowners a hypothetical question. Hey, if you were to rent out your house today, what do you think you could get for it? It's not a real number. It's an opinion, a guess.
And here's the smoking gun. According to the Wolf Street piece, there was this really suspicious sudden drop in that OER data over just a few months. And because OER is such a huge part of the CPI, that one weird dip is pulling the entire inflation number down artificially. The argument is simple. This isn't what's really happening in the housing market. It's a glitch in the data, and it's making inflation look way lower than it actually is.
Okay, so the housing number has a glitch. But if you think that's bad, wait till you hear about health insurance. The author doesn't just call this one a glitch, they call it, and I'm quoting here, absurd.
And you can really feel the frustration here. The author of the piece, Wolf Richter, he's not just pointing out a statistical error. He's saying my frustration is boiling over. This is very serious. He sees this as something that's totally misrepresenting the financial pain people are actually feeling.
This right here just lays out the problem so clearly. On one side, you have your actual costs, what you pay in premiums, deductibles, all that stuff that comes out of your pocket. But the official CPI for health insurance, it doesn't track any of that. Instead, it measures the insurance company's retained earnings. It's basically a measure of their profits, not your prices. It's just a completely different thing.
And because of this weird method, the data has been on an absolute roller coaster. Just look at this. It was chugging along, then bam, it spikes 28% in 1 year. Even the agency that calculates it had to say, whoa, okay, this has gone awry, and they changed the formula. And what happened next? The index completely tanked. It fell off a cliff and ended up right back where it was years ago.
So, after all that chaos, the spike, the formula change, the crash, what's the final result? Get this. The official number for health insurance inflation since February 2019 is zero, a flat 0%. Now, I just have to ask you, does that sound right? Have your health insurance costs not gone up at all in the last several years? Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay, so we have a glitch in housing and an absurd metric for healthcare. But so what? Why does this even matter? I mean, who really cares about some nerdy government statistic? Well, it turns out we all should, because these numbers have a huge real-world impact that ripples out and affects pretty much everything. Think about it. The annual cost of living increase for Social Security, that's tied directly to the CPI. You know those inflation-protected bonds, TIPS? Their payout is based on the CPI. Even some commercial rent contracts are tied to it. But the real biggie is the Federal Reserve. They look at the CPI to decide whether to raise or lower interest rates, and that decision affects your mortgage rate, your car loan, your credit card interest, everything.
And if you want to see what this looks like for a real person, just listen to this. It's a comment from a reader on the original Wolf Street article. This guy, Charlie, he's been tracking his own expenses. So while the government says 0% health insurance inflation, his Medicare premium is up almost 50% since 2019. His deductible, up over 50%. I mean, that's the disconnect, right there in black and white.
So, It's easy to just point out all the problems, right? But the good news is this analysis doesn't just stop there. It actually lays out a pretty clear plan to fix the CPI, to make it a tool that actually measures what's happening to our wallets.
And the fixes are really straightforward. Step 1, for housing, just abolish the OER. Stop asking people to guess what their home might rent for. Instead, track the things people actually pay, like property taxes, home insurance, and maintenance costs. Like they do in Canada. Step 2, for health insurance, get rid of that bizarre retained earnings method. Just scrap it, and instead track what we actually pay. Our premiums, our deductibles, our copays. It just seems like common sense.
And there's one last piece to the puzzle. Once you fix the way we measure health insurance, you have to fix how much accounts for in the total CPI. Right now, it's weighted at less than 1%. Think about that. Less than 1% of the inflation index is dedicated to healthcare costs. The author calls that a ridiculous absurdity. And, when you think about how much families spend on healthcare, it's hard to disagree.
Which really brings us to the big final question here. The CPI is supposed to be the yardstick we use to measure the economy. But what happens if that yardstick is broken? If the very tool we're using to understand our financial reality is giving us bad information, well, how can we possibly make good decisions for ourselves or for the country when we might just be flying blind?